When it comes to the pros and cons, when it comes to green economy and implementing this, there are, of course, a lot of heated debates as to which sector is going to suffer the most, whether we're going to see unemployment suffer and whether we're going to see the environment suffer. Mr. Mahajan, perhaps let's start off with you, and you can tell us some of the findings of the report, because we've actually seen economic growth in South Africa plummeting to around 3% this year, as opposed to the 3.5% that we were expecting at the beginning of 2011.
That's right. We do see a slowdown in economic growth in South Africa this year and in the medium term as well, because of some short-term risks which have to be managed. But there is the longer-term structural challenges as well, among which the green economy in South Africa's transition to low-carbon growth is an important one. And that's the focus of our report, where we look at South Africa's objectives with respect to higher growth and employment generation, together with its objectives of low carbon growth and cleaner environment. And we find that there are important synergies between the two objectives.
Mr. Brahmbhatt, perhaps you could also just delve into the fact that we've got Eskom and Sasol, of course, being a very big carbon emitters in the country and very strategically important to the country as well. Of course, we are focusing on coal-fired power plants in South Africa, but at the same time, we want to diversify further. Can it be done?
It can, but it has to be approached in a realistic way. That's some of the main messages in our report, in fact, is that we need to really balance the costs of green policies in a realistic way against the advantages. And we need to put in place the kind of complementary policies that are needed to get some of the benefits from green growth. So in terms of the carbon issue, perhaps you need to look at a portfolio of policies. The simplest thing might be to start off working on things like energy efficiency, right, where one is reducing economic costs, one is getting economic benefits, and the really win-win kind of situation is quite. Another kind of area is to have realistic carbon pricing. Now, the country is already moving quite well on that in terms of moving towards more realistic electricity prices, and that's going to have positive benefits for energy efficiency and so on. Now, the country is also seriously talking about moving towards a carbon tax. That's something that needs to be approached in a kind of medium-term sort of way, maybe start with a low level, allow time for the country to adjust to the carbon tax, put in complementary policies. For example, the money that you raise from carbon taxes can be very nicely recycled to reduce other taxes that are inhibiting growth or that are inhibiting jobs, labor taxes, capital taxes. You could use it for very productive public investment and so on.
That point, because one of the big issues when it comes to carbon tax and even the increasing electricity tariff, yes, we're going to have a more cognizant consumer when it comes to the use of electricity, but it could actually have a very big impact on employment. And the point is that we need to create jobs. Of course, we know that our president, Jacob Zuma, has actually promised 5 million jobs over the next 10 years. Do you think a green economy can actually offer that to the poverty-stricken people of the country?
The green economy does offer opportunities, I think, but it depends on the kind of complementary reforms that you put in place along with the environmental policies. For example, a move towards renewables opens the opportunities for manufacturing in the country. But unless the firms in the country are competitive, that's going to be very difficult to take advantage of. So it depends very much on the kind of complementary policies that you put in place to enhance the effects of the green economy.
And of course, policy seems to be the crux word there. Can it be done? We know, of course, there's quite a lot of talk. COP17 is around the corner. This is really going to be a very big focus. But the point is that we've actually not really seen a very strong implementation of the existing policies, and perhaps there has been a bit of a confusion. What needs to be done going into 2012 so that we do ensure that the next growth path that we see in the country is going to be a green one?
One of the important sort of points that we make in this report is that green growth, so-called green growth, is not a silver bullet. You need to have policies that directly address growth and employment issues, right? And there's a lot of things that people discuss under those fronts. Yeah. And you need to have policies that directly address your environmental issues. And then you look for the synergies and payoffs between those. So that's, as a preliminary, let's not kind of expect that simply pursuing green policies is going to deliver all sorts of goodies. Yeah. It's not, right? Now, then within that, then there are, we look for how movements towards on the green side can deliver growth and jobs along the lines that my colleague Sandeep had mentioned. For example, you're talking about energy efficiency. In many countries, that sector is a very fruitful place for SMEs, for SME employment, small firms doing all sorts of refurbishment in terms of energy efficiency and so on. South Africa, in international terms, tends to have a relatively weak performance on SME formation. So an important complementary policy to get your energy efficiency would be reforms that help the SME sector to flourish more, because then your energy efficiency sector would also be able to have more firms going in there, more jobs coming up, and doing a more effective job. That's another example of the sorts of things that we need to do to get these two benefits together.
Okay, so let's drill into some of the things that we actually need to see changed from a policy perspective, and what you're advising right now to change the scenario that we're speaking of, to change it into a very positive one.
Okay, so we do know some of the policy constraints which hold back the growth of the small and medium enterprises that Milan, my colleague, was mentioning. Our analysis has shown that access to finance, for example, is an issue which inhibits the growth of small enterprises in South Africa. Crime tends to be an issue. Distance from the markets and expensive transportation tends to be an issue. Competition policy is another important inhibitor of small enterprises. So it's very important to stay focused on these sets of policies to not only benefit from green economy, but overall growth and employment.
I see you agreeing there, Mr. Brahmbhatt, but also, what about the private sector and involvement thereof? There's a few stories that a few companies, of course, want to embark on cogeneration, but because the policies are not there, they're holding back, and they are very willing, but they just need to see a change on paper.
I think, definitely the country is laying out a variety of kind of ambitious policy agendas. I think the green issues play quite a big role in the National Development Plan. You've got the Green Economy Accord. So, it's the country's leaders themselves are now grappling with these issues. And our objective in this report is not so much to sort of push one thing or the other, but to provide analysis that will be helpful to them in making those decisions. So there's definitely a broad policy agenda where the country is looking at, in terms of the integrated resource plan, on how to have adequate energy resources going forward. Cogeneration would be a part of that. All sorts of investments in being contemplated in renewables, nuclear, a sort of mixed portfolio of energy assets going forward. The point that we make in the report is that, the country is balancing various needs, right? It actually needs more energy simply for a growing economy, right? And that has to come into place. At the same time, it's looking to start making some of its contributions on the decarbonization side of things, and trying to find a way to do that in a way that's kind of effective and doesn't disrupt economic growth. And it's doing that by looking at a sort of portfolio of policies, part of which is moving more towards renewables. There's some now quite ambitious plans are being put forward. But in addition, looking at things like energy efficiency, looking at things like carbon pricing and so on.
Very quickly, before we say goodbye, COP17, are you confident that we'll see a very successful
I would give it a full thumbs up and remain
full
confident.
thumbs up for you, Mr. Brahmbhatt. Do you also believe so? Are you feeling confident?
This is something for the politicians. I wish them the best of luck.